Good afternoon and welcome everybody to Shortlist Showcase as part of the 2020 Queensland Architecture Awards. My name is Julie Beveridge. I'm the National Manager of CPD Coordination and Delivery here at the Institute, and it's my pleasure to be with you today as we are walked through the shortlisted projects in the Beatrice Hutton Award for Commercial Architecture. There are 7 projects being presented this afternoon, and we'll be hearing from Shai Tay from Archifield, Tristan Wong from SJB, Alana Coburn of Coburn Architects, Kate Abbott and Josh Wallace of Wallace Bryce Architecture, beg your pardon, Vino Modali of To Create Architecture, Matthew Lame of Jacobs, and Andrew Brock of Andrew Brock Architecture. The number of shortlisted entries in this category is a testament to the high quality and diversity of entries across the state in this category. But without further ado, first up today is Shai Tay from Archifield, who'll be presenting their shortlisted project, Camp Hill Marketplace. When you're ready, Shai, thank you.
Well, firstly, thank you everyone for making time on a Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. on this webinar. It's a pleasure to share this project with everyone online. My name is Shai. I'm a principal at Archifield, and today I'm going to present Camp Hill Marketplace, which is a project that we completed in 2018. And the journey actually started a bit earlier in the back end of 2015-16. when an existing client that we have done some house design for came to us of a project that is already got some stages started, and he was wondering if we would be keen to look at the subsequent stages. So I'm going to go through a few elements of the project. Firstly, the context and the setting where we start off, the narrative of the brief that we've got, the site, and then what we were handed, and perhaps focus more on the retail journey that we took upon with the client to discover what are the missing ingredients for this center that could actually make it a very fabulous suburban regional center. Camp Hill, for those that know where it is and are in Brisbane, it's within just over 5K from the CBD, so a very nicely populated hilly suburb. And in Camp Hill, there's an existing center which comprises of Samuel Village and White Hills Village. Before 2015, both were actually separate centers. Samuel Village starting earlier on as a street shopping center, followed by White Hills Village, which was actually developed by the old Central Group. And you could see across this area photo just pre-2015 on the vast amount of concrete and pavement and roof that exists across the whole site. And it is nested within quite an established post-war suburb of Camp Hill with lots of nice weatherboard and brick houses. The existing Samuel Village, the existing White Hills Village, glorified with photographer's trick, I would say. But what it does actually does for the locals is it's one of those convenience centers that is very active, very well frequented, but probably in some sense it's those trips that you do once a week. You get in, do a whole lot of grocery shopping, and then you move on. So it doesn't actually present as a place that one would say that it's got a community feel to it. It is a place that you go and probably hang and dwell around as compared to some of the larger regional center like a Westfield, or going into the inner city like a Tenerife or New State or the West End. So our client Danny then subsequently acquired a house towards the north of the site, towards the east of the site where my cursor is, and engaged another friend architect to deliver stage 1 for him. So when I was actually got the phone call, stage 1 has actually just started on site with excavation of the car park. And there was a few questions that Danny had in his mind that started the journey of a conversation of what the overall center aspiration is. And a few success factors we look at was that successful retail centers are evolving into social hubs. So, and we wanted to create a community-based environment which can drive retail, food, and people to come together. And everyone, I guess, in the regional suburbia center works really hard to drive the retail and food. And often those that does better are places that values maybe a third ingredient. And in this case, on this project, what we were working through with him was perhaps is actually the third space, the public space, the public realm as the anchor tenant, the space that doesn't generate any revenue, but then actually create an uplift in revenue for every single tenancy. So how can we actually create that, and what would this means here? The stage 2 site in this site plan shows 2 existing houses demolished and then amalgamated into a 1,400 meter square site. There was a few key moves in actually setting up this community-based environment that we keep harping on, that people will come, they'll love it, they will come here 3 times a week, 4 times a week. I myself is a local after the center was completed. I wasn't a local before that, but I actually live in the area now. We need to present the front door better. It is an inward-looking center. We don't actually have the scope to actually make it more outward-looking and create a high street externally in a traditional sense, but we could actually create this high street internally, and the making of street rather than driveways and car park became one of the key considerations. There needs to be a social heart. The existing site with the extent of hard stand and car park with the heat island effect lacks a place which actually provides the shade, lacks a place that provide perhaps the green and other ingredients for people to dwell. Is there ways I could dwell without actually paying a single dollar and hang around and feel comfortable? That was a question. And the other thought that permeates through a lot of our work is where we look at opportunities to create a generous roof, because a generous roof is really quite a nice gesture within our subtropical climate, the subtropical lifestyle that we have, to allow that generosity to embrace all the program within it. So collecting all the different ideas into this diagram that actually shows how the stage 2, which is on the top right hand corner, completes some of the missing element in stage 1 to then really anchor and contain the projects. A part cut area of just the stage 2 and the stage 1 and an existing center coming together, defining where the scope focus is. And a quite early on sketch, drawing over the sketch 1 plans and then trying to illustrate the idea of the making of the street, making the street a safer environment to cross, sacrificing 4 car parks and then putting 8 trees into the internal road, making it more of a street. The site is backing onto the White Seals Reserve. So we had that analogy of perhaps the landscape has some synergy of how the forest grow from the White Seals Reserve can be brought onto the site. So you can see from that scribble within the meter of the stage 1 and 2 coming together, working with Damien Thompson of Lab 27, we sort of co-share this sketch together to work out what this growth, the lawn and the place to dwell might be. And very early on, the establishing of this place that we call the Green Hut, in effect, provide the basis to frame the 2-story commercial just over 900 meters square of retail space across 2 stories around this Green Hut, wrapping the roof around, then allowing the hut to be presented to get all the northern daylight, presenting the hut that get exposure back to the existing center as well. One key point about another way that would have happened if we cut it differently is that it is a site that if we build all the retail on 1 floor and forget about the 2nd story, I'm just flipping through the 2 plans, we could have got quite an effective retail box that could actually have satisfied a very large fruit grocer coming in and then do an basement car park. So what we found with talking a lot of our retail clients, to focus on what the car park yield and what the yield for the retail spaces. And in this instance, talking quite intently with Danny that, well, we actually sort of know how much car park we're going to get when we extend it. And then if we actually do the boxes quite differently and stack it, we could actually start to, I'm just going to go to an area that starts to create an open space, which currently doesn't exist across the whole center. And this is the place that we feel that could actually start to help for the community to come together and actually hang around. People will turn up at 7, grab a coffee, grab something to eat before they start their grocery shopping at 9. Other strategies from a commercial point of view that we worked really hard on was to provide as big as a floor plate that we can across the floor slab, set up by using post-tension slab to allow all the tenancy to be able to interchange with all the structural frame around the edges. A big fan of not putting plants on the roof, so creating a plant on the first floor to allow the roof, which is an important element to our neighbors, to be relatively flat, falling gently back into the heart, to the green heart, so that the sense of the energy channeling to the green heart becomes evident with the wrapping roof strategy. The building form, acknowledging the height of the 2- and 3-story brick homes across the street, slowly sort of anchoring itself to the sloping side. And then with the roof, which is devoted of not putting condenser unit on the roof, meant that the roof becomes a lot cleaner and a lot more respectful to our neighbors. And the resulting project in a modest way, or just over 2,000 meters square, which 1,000 is actually the basement car park. It all in all costs around $4 million to build. So roughly around 1,900 meters square per meter square of build cost. The palette that we looked at was partly influenced by the materials that we were able to convince the client to use in the stage 1 that when it was actually being completed. And also the sense that a bit of reoccurring pattern in some of our works, having fairly dark eaves, which sort of resembles like an eyeshadow, and then framed underneath with a glowing warm roof. And in this instance, actually ply roof permeating through. Working hard in wayfinding strategies to have signage that looks like lanterns facing the internal street. So the tenants at the back, Naked Food, Jocelyn Provisions, the optometrists all still feel comfortable that they're actually set behind the internal street and not worried that they're actually not in your face right at the front, because there's something about retail that works really well with discovering. And a huge success in terms of the retail aspect is we were able to attract Jocelyn Provisions, Botanica, Naked Food, No Donuts. Those are actually retailers that's typically in the inner city area of Newfoundland and Tenerife. And with the right setting, Danny was able to actually get them to come to Camp Hill Marketplace. There used to be 2 bakeries. Now there's actually 5 bakeries on site. No one's complaining. And the reason no one's complaining is there's actually more local shopping here. More people would go there rather than once a week to 2 or 3 times a week. A few shots just going through around the green area, the transitionings of the roof, showing how the space could be actually layered. At different days, we always thought that the lawn and some of the stage settings would be great for kids to run around. We've got barbecues and different things, raffles being done within this public space as well for fundraising. And this shot in particular, which is actually quite intriguing and romantic in my mind, on the day when Scott Boros, the photographer, went to site to take this photograph, the mom in the black singlet actually came out of the car, opened the booth, the pram, the TP tent, the rug, and the toddler. They actually then set up to have a picnic in the afternoon in 2 p.m. on the site. That actually shows a lot of value, perhaps, that this whole stage 2 extension has brought to the community, that one would actually want to take the kids there and actually do a picnic there. And it actually warms our heart in the variety of ways that the site has been used. over its short, I think 18 months since it's open. A shot from the upper level showing how the roofs and the layering allows different viewpoints back to Woolworths. And for those that work in retail, making sure that Woolworths is happy with whatever's happening around is quite a fairly important thing for our clients. So there was certain views and gestures being done so that everyone feels comfortable about it, and Woolworths can't complain. A year after the stage 2 has opened, they have actually got an uplift in sales close to a 2-digit percentile than the same time the year before the extension actually opened. And in closing up, I think I've took more than my 3 minutes that I initially promised that I'll cut down to, and probably closer to just over 10 minutes, is that in terms of how we will approach it, being place responsive, hoping to actually create the right subtropical environment for retail to thrive, and putting people in the place that actually allows us to actually find something familiar, but at the same time, quite intriguingly new, is fairly important in retail, because we want the new things that we bring in to have relevance to the local. We not bring something from Japan or Thailand or other parts of the world in a retail sense into this area. It needs to be something that the locals feel attracted to, and most importantly, placing public space in the heart of this project had meant that it's been a great success. Thank you. I might just stop there.
Thank you so much for that, Shai. You can have it on good authority. I'm local to that area, and my 8-year-old refers to that particular shopping centre as the fancy Woolworths, and that's what most of his friends call it as well. So if that's not a community victory, I don't know what is. Thank you for taking the time to present your project with us today. Next up, we'll be hearing from Tristan Wong, beg your pardon, of SJB, who will walk us through the Fantuzzo. Over to you, Tristan.
Thank you for having me. I'm just going to connect the screen. I hope you can all hear me okay. Okay. Thanks for having me. My name is Tristan Wong, one of the directors at SJB. This project is called the Fantuzzo. It's one of the art series hotels in the Howard Smith Wharves precinct. An amazing area in Brisbane on the river that's gone through an incredible transformation over the last few years, going from an area that had some significant historical buildings on the site, a number of sheds, wharf buildings, and even remnants of bunkers from the war, to now being revitalised into an incredibly active precinct, incredible sort of public offering. I think from a development point of view that it wasn't for residential or another high density use. It was actually a significant contribution to the city of Brisbane, I believe, and the way that it's been used with organic gardens, exhibition spaces, breweries. The hotel, which is obviously this project, has meant an incredible revitalisation of this whole precinct. A lot of people use this whole area because there's even in this area you can see a walking track, cycling, jogging track that runs along the Brisbane River, runs all the way through into Brisbane CBD. So it gets a lot of traffic moving through here, which is fantastic again from that activation point of view. The site and the history of the site is really interesting, how it evolved over time. The wharf buildings were used for a period, and then later they were ceased use from the Howard Smith Wharf Company, and the Water Police used some of the buildings on site for a period of time. The construction of the bridge was an incredible engineering feat, and that really became quite a driver for the project as well, this incredible man-made object. And then against that, you've got the cliff, this amazing sort of topographical, natural aspect of the site. So you can see here the location, ridge that runs over the Brisbane River, and the site is sort of tucked right into the bend, part of the bend of the river and against the cliff. So this is the site in an aerial perspective, looking at some of the heritage buildings that needed to be preserved, and certainly from a council point of view, they needed to be prominent and be not, I guess, compromised by this project and this building that would go in behind it. The bridge was another significant constraint on the site. There's very large pylons or structural columns that support the bridge. We had to be a certain number of metres away from that. We had to be a certain number of metres away from the heritage buildings, and we were wanting to build up very close to the cliff itself. The site sits within a flood precinct or area, 100-year flood, but it's happened twice in the last 10 years, flooding at this part of the site. So it is subject to flooding. It's all been part of this amazing, as I was saying, precinct regeneration. So the hotel is just one component, but it offers a really great location for a boutique hotel in quite a unique location. Two of the aspects we started to really take, I guess, cues from a design point of view was this incredible bridge that the building was going to be sitting directly underneath, and the amazing kind of escarpment and cliff walls that are now quite heavily vegetated over time. Some of that vegetation was pulled back to reveal more of the cliff, but it's now grown back again in a lot of areas. So just a few site photos, which you can see the context. This kind of what was a bit of a car park is where most of the building is now sitting. So you do get an amazing view out of the building to the cliff. You can see these two elements that became quite inspiration, I guess, for the project, taking almost this sort of geometric form of the bridge and merging that or blending that or marrying that with the more organic tonal qualities and topography and sort of faceted nature of the cliff face. This is some early sketches just showing how the cliff was, the building would blend into the cliff. So as you saw those sort of earthy, fragmented, almost fractal-like cliff face would become the building itself. The entire ground floor activated to front onto this esplanade where there's a lot of activation. And you can see obviously the sort of the geometry in the building was taking these cues from the truss of Story Bridge. Some basic sort of renders at the time, which were just showing these large cutaways, which are again sort of that craggy cracks within the cliff. They also helped, I guess, further articulate the building. And there's a lot of things we're trying to manage here in getting efficiency in the building, the design. We already had, it's a 165 room hotel. There's about 40 different room types. We hadn't, and certainly the builder hadn't worked on a hotel with so many different types. So there was, it was very challenging to kind of, build basically, notwithstanding the facade, which ended up being quite a complex facade as well. I'll just flick through these quickly. They're just basic renders that we did at the time for the town planning to describe the building. There's a rooftop pool, which is pretty amazing being up there, and you can look out over the river. And there's extensive planting that's now going on over the entire building, kind of falling over the edges like this. And we wanted that to be really a part of the building, that it became overgrown and it was really a backdrop to the heritage buildings. And it was quite we think we achieved that reasonably successfully in creating a building that had its own identity, but also allowed the foreground buildings to be more prominent. So it balances both in that it sort of has its own story to tell, but the heritage buildings remain the important thing on the site. The facade again had a lot of complexity to how it was designed, and the modules that we had, there ends up being 50 plus modules, but tessellating the panels and the coloration were able to make it work. We actually mapped the entire cliff, and then the mapping was what determined where colour went on the building and the sort of the location of panels. Every room had to have an openable window as well, so we had to coordinate how you got the panelisation, the kind of geometry of the building, and operability to the suites. The ground floor plan, quickly, the purple showing retail activation, all of that fronting onto the esplanade and backing onto other retail food and beverage premises. Really great traffic that moves through this precinct, people on bikes and walking and scooters and everything, so it's highly activated precinct, and lots of vegetation going in around the whole area as well. The back of house we kept as small and as compact as possible. There's 3 different lifts. One is for the services, one's for the guests, and this one down the end is actually for the public. We wanted the public to be able to come into the building and use the rooftop bar, but not have a whole lot of people coming through the main lobby, which would kind of create a bit of chaos. So there is actually a way that people can get onto the rooftop bar, which is also a conference area, from the basement or from the ground level esplanade. The other thing that people experience is you come into the lobby and the entire back wall is glass, and you immediately connect with the cliff. You see the cliff, and there's that sort of connection to the landscape and the sort of the former experience of the site, which obviously never had a building in this location previously. This is just showing how the rooms were cut up. Now, there was a lot of discussion with the client at the time as to whether we would have rooms facing the cliff. There was people thinking that wouldn't work, and I think we convinced the client and the broader design team that that would be a great idea to have rooms facing the cliff. That turned out to be some of the most spectacular. They're really amazing. You have this big frame view. It's like you can touch the cliff, and in fact, in some areas we're within a metre or two of the cliff, which was really hard from a construction point of view, getting craneage and pouring concrete and all of these other things so close to the cliff. But for the guests that get those rooms, they're really special. Otherwise, you get the riverfront. So basically, all rooms have a great outlook and a beautiful aspect. Just on this floor alone, there's around 20 different types. It doesn't look like it, but every corner type, ones that have a faceted angle, internal corners, deeper ones. So there's a lot of different types for anyone who's worked on hotels. It's a bit of a nightmare, but it ends up being really special. I've stayed in a couple of different rooms, and they all have really interesting quirks of their own. How we have to get, bathrooms to work, the beds, small kitchen areas and whatnot. Going up through the building, part of the building drops away because of obviously the bridge goes overhead, and it's got a big gantry that is used for maintenance. So there's a whole amazing sort of activated rooftop. It was, at this drawing, this was an early town planning, just had a pergola. It's a lot more fancy than that now. It's got a whole conference centre, bar, and the pool still. So it's a really beautiful, very greened landscape area up there now. And then the smaller portion here continues up for another 4 stories, 3 or 4 stories. Again, that was when it was a very basic level 3. It's now a lot more lavish, I guess. I won't go through the elevations too much, but you can sort of see, again, that idea of the tessellating panelization and the way the colour was arranged across it, from the sort of the green tones through to the more sandy colour and earthy tones. Sectionally, the building, where it sits against the cliff, how close it gets, and in other areas the cliff comes right up and almost kisses the building. At the ground level, we really wanted this kind of strength that held the building up. So it's all exposed concrete and all sort of natural timbers for the soffits and undersides. This is an area where people can have the tenants. I'll wrap this up now. I think that's my signal. Has a breakout space or a covered area for when it's heavy rain, but you can see the beautiful connection you get to the cliff. Abundant greening was really important. The idea of the building as a backdrop, which we think does really well. These large cutaways across the building, again, added complexity, but helping sort of, changing the scale of the building and the sort of that idea of this craggy sort of cliff face. All the plantings now really draping over and falling over the edges of this building, so it's become really sort of embedded in its context, which is beautiful. We had cutouts in the concrete where people could put their signage. The rooftop pool. And in the rooms, it was all exposed concrete. We wanted, again, that feeling of the rawness and the connection to sort of the history of the site. There were the concrete bunkers thrown across the site. And I think partly also the philosophy of the building minimising material use. So not having any ceilings in any of the rooms massively reduced the material use in the building. Created other challenges acoustically, but we think it worked beautifully from the experience of these rooms and what people kind of, yeah, the connection to the landscape. Even when they're in the bathrooms. And that's it, the final statement. The social impact of this project is powerful. The site has gone from being semi-abandoned and poorly utilised to now one of Brisbane's most active, vibrant and historically rich precincts, encouraging a diverse demographic and cultural array to enjoy and engage with this part of the Brisbane River. So thanks for having us. It was an incredible project to be part of, and thank you to our team that delivered it. It looks wonderful, and I hope other people in Brisbane have enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Some amazing imagery there. And I really love that there's this ongoing conversation about social impact and community value through the projects that we've heard from so far. Thanks for joining us. I'd like now to hand over to Alana Coburn of Coburn Architects, presenting the shortlisted project Community Education and Disaster Coordination Centre, which has also been shortlisted for the Regional Project of the Year. Over to you, Alana.
Thank you. Share my screen here. Okay, thanks Julie, and thank you to the Institute for the opportunity to share our project with you and everyone that's watching. This project is the Community Education and Disaster Coordination Centre. It's located in Hutton, which is up here. It's a rural town on the tablelands to the southwest of Cairns. 750 metres above sea level, so it's a bit cooler and less humid than what Cairns is. And the region's known for its beautiful fresh produce, rainforest areas, crater lakes and waterfalls. This is where our site is, the yellow rectangle, which is just off the main street of Acton. It's in this area, which is, the whole block is a new precinct for community services. So there's existing logging pool, tennis courts in the area. It's close to the council building, and there's a master plan for other community services to be included on this site. The Tablelands Regional Council asked us to design a multifunction facility that offers Atherton and its greater region a hub for community engagement and disaster training and coordination for and during disaster events. Essentially, the building acts as a purpose-built response centre to coordinate and direct services and volunteers during disaster events such as cyclones and bushfires, and also unexpected events, unfortunate events such as the Ravenshoe cafe explosion that happened a few years ago. The council wanted a robust structure with a modern, iconic aesthetic, setting an architectural precedent for the new community services precinct it's situated in. And as well as that, the building envelope had the design guidelines for Queensland public cyclone shelters. We had two client representatives that worked with us throughout the project. One was the manager for project and technical services at the council, and he had a lot of input to the aesthetics of the building and reinforced the importance of creating a relevant piece of civic architecture for the region. And the other one was the senior advisor of emergency management, who helped to navigate the functional requirements of the building and agreed to a calming internal finishes palette, considering the nature of the building's program and its high pressure environment. We started the project by analysing the surrounding neighbourhood and tried to respect the Jay's Heritage Building, which is the Price House, an old teacher's residence, and also the neighbouring fire station, fairly significant church across the road, and just the general single-storey residences that are typical of Atherton. So these are just some more images to give you a better idea of the context of the site. So this is the red brick fire station with a very simple sloping facade that faces our site. This is the fairly austere church across the road, again, which has red brick. And this is the enterprise house adjoining our site, which has kind of quirky gable roofs and random window patterns. Our concept looked at three main elements. Firstly, the relationship of the built form to its neighbourhood fabric, including the aesthetic language of the residential and civic roof forms. So this is just some design intent imagery that we put together at the start of the project to show these ideas connected to the neighbourhood fabric, and also, and the materiality of the red brick, the iron roofs, and rendered block and the weatherboard cladding. The second important element of our concept was to create a strong dynamic structure which reflects the building program and function. And thirdly, we wanted to create some transparent and calm interiors within that robust structure. So this diagram shows how building structure was conceived. So we have the principal structure of the concrete block walls with large openings for connection and transparency. A secondary skin in perforated aluminium to protect those openings, and that was coloured in a Courtyard powder coat to tie into the red brick in the area. And then the third element of the structure is this angular roof that reflects the roof forms in the neighbourhood and also helps anchor the building to the ground. So these images just show those three main elements. So the angular roof form, this Courtyard screen around the facade, and also the profile metal cladding kind of related to the weatherboard cladding on the neighbouring buildings. Once again, just the roof form folding down in the screen. The screen wrapped around the whole of the building and also created some outdoor spaces that could be utilised in a cyclone event as well. A lot of work went into the technical resolutions of the screens and the roof. This is just an image in the core of the building looking out through the structure. At the start of the project, we visited the nearby Cairns Disaster Centre and the Red Lynch Cyclone Shelter and spoke with Mr Mullins, who put together the design guidelines for Queensland public cyclone shelters. So all the screens were designed to withstand a Category 5 cyclone with 306 km/h winds, and they had a maximum 8mm diameter holes in them to prevent debris impact on the building. So we learned a lot about the functional and structural requirements from our research, as well as the importance of providing flexible space and an institutional feel, and ensuring the acoustic treatments and technology were fully integrated into the building. We felt that the other facilities we visited were very enclosed and didn't promote a sense of well-being of the occupants. They also had a lot of add-on technology in them and acoustic panels to try to make them functional. So this is an image looking at the entry and corridor space. It shows how we tried to send the three elements from the external of the building, so the concrete walls, the perforated screens, and the angular geometry into the interiors as much as possible to enhance the indoor-outdoor connection. So you can see angular roof coming in here. We also designed custom graphics and artworks for the building, which uses pixelation to pick up on the perforations of the screens and the angular forms. And this is an image just looking at the reception. You can see the perforated plywood used internally, which relates to the same pattern of the screens externally. The rendered concrete block and angular geometry is brought into the reception counter as well. Oh yeah, this is our floor finishes plan, which shows kind of the step we went into to bring the angular geometry and perforation into the interiors as well. The plan of the building is very simple, with the more public group spaces on the eastern side of the building under the higher roof form, and the back of house spaces were located under the lower roof form on the western side of the building. During the design process, the client actually increased the briefed area by about 300 metres squared to include the Rural Fire Services Brigade and the SES into the building. So there's kind of this area here, and most of this space here was all added into the brief without increasing the budget. So we had to use very efficient planning to stay on budget. And this is just a longitudinal section that shows the way the building rises up and creates the largest volumes at the front of the building for the public and group spaces. And this is looking in the corridor space, so you can see how we use the transparency and high roof volumes to make the space feel more spacious, even though they're quite simple spaces. And these images just show a bit more of the materiality of that and the light into that corridor. In order to maximise the efficiency of the planning, we had things like the staff locker areas, the kitchen spaces, and the like photocopier bays were just integrated into the corridor space, so that we didn't take up extra room with those. And we also extended the interiors concept into the FF&E selections that we did. This is just our early FF&E materials board for the interiors. And bring the same preparation into the furniture and using some timber elements to help soften the interiors. This is just a close-up of some of the graphics that we did for the signage, showing that pixelated pattern, which was actually, the pixelated pattern was actually based on an image that we took from some satellite imagery of Cyclone Larry crossing the coast. These are just some images of the functional spaces of the building. So this is in the call centre, which is now fitted out with a lot of computer screens. This is permanently set up for a disaster management scenario, but you can see that even though it's quite a functional space, you still get a great connection to the natural light and a strong connection to the outdoors. And yeah, we still use the integrated plywood panels throughout these spaces as well to give them a bit of warmth and also enable them to be functional. And this is just looking through to where the senior advisor, the emergency management officer is. And so she's able to see what's happening in the disaster coordination centre without being interrupted so much. She can also meet with politicians and media there without them interfering what's happening. And this is just looking at the larger conference space. So in a disaster centre, this is used by volunteers as a breakout space and also meeting space. And this space can be hired out by the public throughout the year for any community event and also for disaster training. These are just some shots at the back of the building showing how we extended the protective screening through to the rear of the building to protect the bin area, and also integrated the plant air conditioning to the building. There's some shots during construction to, I guess, show the complexity of the resolution of the roof screens, which we worked on like in the detail phase, and also through the whole of construction. We had a project manager that we worked with and also the builder to get these things completed on time and budget. They were still installing the screens the week before the building opened. And this is just a final shot looking at the long roof form which faces towards the fire station on the east. Shows how kind of simple it is on this building in comparison to the angular forms on the front. We used the monolith joining system, so we didn't have any steps in the roof, and we went to a lot of effort with as I said, with the structural engineer and the hydraulic engineer to resolve all the detail around that. And I think I also like this shot because it shows there was a nice fall across the site, and the building was kind of embedded into the site, which gave it a little bit of a bunker feel, but you still had these large openings opening up to the outdoors. So I guess that is a very brief summary of our project. And I'm very thankful to have a client with such a strong architectural and community vision for the project, and a great team of engineers to work with to deliver it. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Alana. I'm going to hoist us back down to the other end of the state now and welcome the lovely Kate Abbott and Josh Wallace from Wallace Bryce Architecture, who are presenting The Island, which is down at Surfers Paradise, I believe. Over to you, Kate and Josh.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be presenting the project today, and an honour to be shortlisted. It's a fun project for us, The Island. It started back in 2015, I think, for us, working with a hospitality client that we'd worked with on a few projects. And the fun thing about it, I guess, for us was it's a project that a lot of people have a sort of collective memory of, and we've kind of built this project around that collective memory. And it's one of those things on the Gold Coast, you can afford to be a bit irreverent, I guess. And if anyone knows the original building, it was the Islander, which was started in two stages, I guess, back in the mid-60s with what was the Travel Lodge on Beach Road in the centre there. And then to the right, a second tower was built early 80s, I guess. So it's had one of the buildings that sort of has a life of its own as it develops. This is probably the memory that we all kind of share of it, which is it being one of the key venues at schoolies on the Gold Coast. So probably not in its heyday, but a memory that, and we enjoy this when we talk to people the first time about the project and mention the Islander. It's often this sort of cheeky grin that you'll catch of people and their memories of it from those times. But it really suffered from a building that develops over time, and the management program, I guess, changes, and laws change and things change, and what was at one point an open and sort of activated edge got shut down, and we ended up with a building when we first saw it, which had a gaming lounge, which is a really internalised space, completely closing off a really prominent corner in the Gold Coast. So from the start, it was pretty clear what we had to do to resolve that. And it was about having a building that really spoke of its context. And we didn't want to just, and there were lots of schemes previous to this, which were about, I guess, making a clean break and demolishing and building something, a shiny new tower, which is so often what happens on the Gold Coast. So it was about, I guess, keeping these layers, and they're not pretty, but it was about working with what we had, and in some cases doing less. But you know, the street edge was really the clear sort of urban design thing to fix.
I think also from the client's perspective as well, in terms of budget, I mean, the tower itself was structurally sound. There was no issue with it. And it was a simple reworking of the rooms, and really quite light treatment of the tower in order to get that functioning. But the key focus was the ground plane and the first level in order to have a building that activated with the street and had more offerings. Yeah. So
this was what was the really prominent corner of the site, really internal. And the funny thing about this one is the time on the clock, which is 10:15 in the morning, and the locals are there gathering at the bar. So it was about really stripping back layers, doing less where we could, and really trying to re-engage with the context and get some legibility happening. So that, the edge condition, I'll just jump back. The condition at the street was really about opening that up, getting eyes on the street and creating a sense of, I guess, openness, but also refuge within the building. And then in a planning sense, a clear, legible access. And obviously with hospitality, it's about controlling that point of access as well. So there's some security issues to deal with, really opening up that ground plane. And then we went to when we go to the next level, the project kind of talks about repurposing existing structures and existing elements as, you know, we get that buildings have a life and they change and evolve over time. And rather than tearing things down, and from a sustainability point of view as well, it's about working with what you have and doing as little as possible and finding opportunities to re-engage and repurpose spaces. So there was an existing kind of really underused roof terrace, which became through this process quite a vibrant rooftop terrace as a sort of entertainment venue. And then to the rear of the site, which was a tennis court, reworking that for a large function space. And then going to the rooms, and we'll look at some photos in a minute of the existing context, but they're quite dark and a bit pokey. It was about a few little interventions, removing some walls, improving access to natural light, and really refreshing the layout. And then on the rooftop, which was a single penthouse, which when we first saw it, felt like it hadn't been inhabited for 10 or 15 years, stripping away those layers and then working with what we had to create a function space. And then just this diagram of the street edge, I guess that openness and really keeping as much of the building intact. And we're not talking about a heritage building by any means, but it's about understanding that so much of what's happened on the Gold Coast has been about tearing down and rebuilding. And that's a shame. I think it's about us trying to, as architects, trying to retain some of that fabric. And it doesn't have to be pretty, but it's a fabric that we all have a collective memory of. So that was really the key driver, and something that worked well in terms of the feasibility as well for the client, and something that they latched onto and drove it as well in terms of the project having its own identity and authenticity.
Yeah, I think it was also a testament to the builder, because a lot of the planning, it wasn't exactly full documentation, because as you were sort of slowly demolishing things and pulling back the layers, we were finding all sorts of things happening. So it was sort of a collective collaboration between the client, the builder, and ourselves in order to get it to where it ended up. And
building in a live venue as well, which is the other challenge that you don't really see in the drawings.
Yeah, because they were functioning at the time. So yeah.
So I guess looking at what was the intervention, this is that street edge that we saw before, but with the new intervention. So we pushed out closer to the boulevard and to Beach Road, and really opened the venue up, pushed the gaming, which really isn't the key driver for the client, but it was there. So we pushed that deep into the site, sort of out of view, I guess, which was important. And then made this lower ground plane work on a much simpler level. It was a series of steps that had kind of been constructed over time, and it meant there's trip hazards and accessibility issues. So cleaning up that ground plane, and then one of the issues, I guess, with rooftop bars is trying to get eyes and ears on the venue from the street. So really trying to push that to the edge and having that as a venue that people can see and engage with from the street. And it's a pretty lively corner of an evening on the weekends, and it's a great spot to sit and kind of surveil and understand what's going on, and can get quite rowdy. The other thing, looking at this photo and up at those feet, so it was about where we could kind of pick up on little cues of the existing building, and it was a very bright pink building. We took some of those tones, and the joke in the office is, you can do a lot with just paint. It's a little intervention, but as you look up from the street, it adds some sort of level of interaction and cues to what was the history of the building. The breeze block was really important, I guess, as well, and it's one of those iconic things that you see on the coast and is getting lost, I guess, as new development comes through. But picking up on those elements of the history of the site from the sort of 50s and 60s, and embedding that into the street edge and that urban context, and having something that has a bit of generosity to the street as well. Just looking at integrating landscaping and just softening that edge with the breeze block and the way that the light plays on it, and integrating signage as well was really key, because the existing building kind of relied on some really over the top signage for legibility, whereas I tried to work with the same palette, I guess, and the neon was really important, but doing it in a more subtle way. Again, looking at how that street edge works, and the engagement that you get, the trams right there, sitting in this spot of an afternoon, there's a nice engagement that just wasn't there before. Some of the spaces internally around the pool, looking at, again, reusing spaces that weren't previously occupied, and looking at opportunities for the client to extend the food and beverage service. And then looking at, again, I mean, this is an interesting one, because the image on the left, as it was when we found the site, and then on the right, and it's simple things. It's just lighting, paint and planting, and some materiality. And it's a way of, I guess, inviting people in, and again, doing as little as possible for the maximum effect, and playing up on that local memory of the site. And it's an interesting one, because in the earlier days, there was quite a glamour around, the Surfers Paradise pool resort, that overlooked the pool, and this whole notion of, well, it's Palm Springs in LA, and that was kind of lost, and it became a value option, really, a hotel designed around, that kind of schoolies demographic. So it was about keeping that memory, but pushing the operation forward. Some views of the rooms as we found it, quite dark and very in need of repair. Yeah. And then the intervention, I guess, removing a wall, letting the light flood in, and working with some warm textures that kind of spoke of that beach feel, and made it a more welcoming offering. And the edge on the balconies, this was in that first couple of slides with the Schoolies Hotel. It was all about people jumping from room to room. The screen was a way of, I guess, solving that problem, and working with some of the geometry elsewhere, but a really simple and light intervention. This is the penthouse as we found it, in various states of disrepair. And this was a space, again, looking at opportunities to repurpose an existing space without a whole lot of structural work required. And this is where we got to with a function space that peels the roof away and lets the light in. And we worked with some great interior designers as well, and they kind of pushed us, I guess, out of our comfort zone. And I think it's the sort of venue to do that, because it's a building that wants to be playful, and it's now able to add that next layer of collective memory as functions happen on the site, and people can re-engage with it. Again, looking at disused spaces on the site, this was the old tennis court in the sort of southwest corner, and looking at, and we've looked at a range of options for this, but the one that was settled on with the client was a function space. So a really open venue that sort of lets the light in and develop this common language, I guess, of light and shadow, and really quite subtropical and simple. And I think for us as a practice, it wasn't about creating a shiny new object of a building. It was about reworking the use, keeping a collective memory, and just having some fun with it, I guess. And creating,
I guess, a common language. The building was quite disjointed and very internalized. And so in general, we were sort of opening it all up, and it's quite a lot of external spaces, really, mostly of the function spaces, and yet having the breeze block and the light timber work coming through as a common sort of language. And thinking about these buildings, as a function space and a hospitality venue, they have a life that continues beyond you, and it's not about creating something that's everlasting. This was a question we got asked during the process, and it's an interesting one. If there was something that was, I guess, the legacy of the project, for us, it's not the building itself. It's about
the idea of keeping an existing building and working with it, keeping that collective memory of the city ongoing and re-engaging with it. So if that's something that another project or client would pick up and run with, then I think that'd be a great outcome. Again, the function spaces and really cost-effective materials. So gang-nail trusses, timber floors. There's a bit of work in this in terms of building up onto an existing podium slab. So there's a lot of steel sort of hidden away in there, but yeah, really light and open.
Yeah, and it worked well with the existing drainage as well that we had with that slab, so that it helped quite a lot.
And then I guess, yeah, again, from an urban design point of view, this is really the outcome for us. It was about a re-engagement with context, and you know, it's not the sort of resort that you enter and are locked away in a sort of discrete world. It's about a venue and a resort that you enter into because of its context and not in spite of it. So really engaging with its context and being on display and on show, and it's a very Gold Coast thing to do, I guess. Just some quick views of the building as it was and where we ended up with. So a very disjointed collection of signage, but there's some elements there that I think you know, we could work with. So reinventing that and opening up the facade and engaging with the street. So you can see on the left the way that the street edge worked previously. We've extended that whole front section as it addresses the boulevard and Beach Road as well. And a lot of it was keeping structure there and building over and tying into that existing structure rather than complete demolition. And that worked great in terms of program and the feasibility as well. That's the last image in terms of that street edge, and I think if anything, it feels right, which is always a nice thing for us at the end of a project. It feels like it should be there. So yeah, just sits in its context, and but it's the next layer of history on this site, and hopefully there'll be lots more.
Yeah.
So that's us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those side-to-side images at the end, I think, were a really wonderful highlight of how you didn't trample on a heyday to make room for future heydays, which I think is a really sensitive approach to that type of project. Thank you for your presentation. That was wonderful. I'm going to travel everybody back up to Cairns now. I should have thought that through earlier, but I didn't. To be presented the Council Water Research Laboratory. We have Vino Medali from To Create Architecture. Thanks, Vino.
Thank you. And I'll just snap onto my presume everyone could see that. First of all, thanks to the Institute for shortlisting what is actually 2CA or To Create Architecture's first project off the boat. And, you know, we're being established and founded just 2 years ago. And this was the first project for 2CA. You know, it's good to mix it up with a bunch of Queensland architects, considering Mark and I are New South Welshmen. So all in good fun. Look, first and foremost, again, thanks for the opportunity to be part of this series and to be shortlisted. Just quickly, and I'm mindful of time, the facility is located next to the existing, what was the existing Cairns water research and testing facility. Just in terms of orientation, not being up the page, the Woodfield Ranges and Atherton Plains are to the northwest. Cairns is basically to the northeast or east. And basically the site, the proposed site, was a greenfield site located right next to the existing facility. Generally, in terms of the location, there were a few challenges. Cairns is cyclone prone, and also the existing site is flood prone. So these were some of the key fundamentals that the architecture or building form had to address. Secondly, one of the other challenges was, or reasons for using the greenfield site next door, was the existing operations and functions could not be interrupted. It is a 24/7 service, and basically there was need to present a new facility without too much of an impact on the current operations. We were also reminded of the fact that this is a taxpayer-funded facility. It was underpinned by a very tight budget, as well as program. Just in terms of the environment again, we had to come up with a facility or building form that had to contend with the cyclonic conditions, as well as in the event of disaster, needed to operate just in the sense of having the capability to test water, or either affected by flood or cyclone. That is, to test the efficacy or the quality of water, either in its used form or waste form. The brief required a facility that had to cater for water testing and analysis. There were two key stakeholder groups, being chemistry as well as microbiology. The existing facility was quite ad hoc and sprawled. There was a lot of duplication in its functions, and the brief required the new facility to consolidate a lot of these functions, to tighten up some of the activities, to also maximize efficiency, and also to meet a tight budget. In other words, we had to prove value for money for the local taxpayers. The building is quite simple in form. It's basically, after a series of options and investigations in its planned footprint, we came up with a H-frame layout that actually is true to the form as I'll present, and you'll see through the presentation. It is true to its function and form. In other words, the brief required a receipt dispatch area for samples drop-off by clientele as well as locals, an analysis zone, testing and research zone, a zone for staff, a breakout zone, but to the end, a zone where you needed to consult with the local community or clientele that are seeking test results and so on and so forth. So it is the building form and plan footprint is staged in according with its functional brief. In terms of the building form and its envelope, it was a simple metaphor that Mark and I came up with. The Whitfield Ranges is a series of peaks, crests, and troughs, and we felt that why not try and represent this in a facility that is generally going to be significant to the local population of Cairns and adjacent councils as well. So we basically adopted the language of the peaks and troughs of the surrounding ranges. And at the end of the day, we also felt that to keep the structure simple, it was probably the best strategy to go with. The peaks and the trough is defined by a simple portal that's mirrored on either end. And in the middle, it's a series of rafters or steel rafters that braces the building. To contend with the cyclonic conditions, we felt basically, after consulting with a few experts locally, we needed to minimize overhangs, cantilevers, anything that became or acted as an umbrella or parachute effect to impact on the facility. So what we decided was to encase the internal functional activity with a single carapace, which was basically enveloping or wrapping these wings with a standing seam zinc form. And these are basically continuous wraparounds with no gutters present. Water basically spills out and drains into capture troughs on either side of the building that feeds rainwater bladders alongside on the north and south wings of the building. The western and eastern ends of the facility are wrapped in glazing, but at the same time protected by perforated screens. The purpose of the glazing was to give some outlook and relief to the laboratories inside, as well as to basically flood the interiors with as much natural light as possible, considering that zinc is a continuous form that wraps the facility. There is some relief zone for the staff internally, which is generally the heart of the facility, that is the internal courtyard, but also contributes to the influx of natural light into the various work zones. The back of house zone is generally populated with a lot of the gas, flammable and inert gas requirements, the field store, samples collection zones. It also caters for field vehicles and customer vehicles to traverse through the site into the facility to drop off samples. And as I've stated previously, the process and flow of sampling and testing water starts from the back with samples drop off and receipt and logging down to testing and analysis, and thereafter to consultation. In the center of the building, what we've discovered in the existing building, the staff servicing the chemistry as well as the microbiology departments were quite fragmented and split apart, and there was need to bring them together, but at the same time to enhance monitoring and cross-visual supervision into the laboratory zones. Each of these laboratories are, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with laboratory terms, but they are PC2 or physical containment level 2. If I translate that to what the world is facing at the moment, COVID-19 is a class 3 or PC3 level organism, but this facility is only testing PC2 or level 2 organisms, PC1 being the lowest. So just simply in terms of the form, again, we try to keep it as simple as possible with a continuous external carapace or shell, punching holes into the facade where possible or opportunistic, to letting natural light, ensuring the facility was anchored solidly to the ground, but at the same time, trying to create an open area within so that there was maximized transparency between all of the activity areas. These are just some renderings of the vision that we had in mind, and basically temperature and humidity was one of the key aspects. Some of the chemistry and biology areas do trace metals at a pico and nano level for water particles. There are metal-free environments in the laboratories as well. So we had to be mindful of the humidity and temperature content to this facility. Unfortunately, The only zone in this area that's naturally ventilated is the internal courtyard, whereas just in their nature, laboratories and the office work zones are all air conditioned. Again, the peaks and troughs, a single carapace that wraps around the facility to keep it to express the geometry in its true form, whereas we felt the actual function of the facility need to represent the form of it as well, or align with it as well. Again, to offer some relief and inward outlook for the researchers and scientists within. Keep in mind they do spend long hours at this facility, sometimes 8 to 16 hours a day. It is in operation 24/7, after hours being samples drop off. There was need to try and punch this facility with enough openings for and make it as transparent as possible for natural light influx. But at the same time, the council was keen on advertising to the local community the activity centre and its purpose without too much of an impact to the internal working activity. And along the streetscape, which is McNamara Street, as the public walks along, you do get a clear visual access, especially towards the early evenings into the late evenings, of the various activities that occur or take place in the facility. These are just some shots of the slab and early structural, early works. Again, those large trough collection zones that feed into the water bladder systems at the back. In order to reduce the concrete footprint or density, underneath the slab there's large polystyrene waffles to basically minimize the use of concrete. To be honest, that came about due to a value engineering exercise, again, to align the project with budget. There's just some shots of the steel portal frame anchored to the base slab. And with the use of the portal, we discovered that there was great opportunity to open up the internal of the facility, so that number one, whilst it looked quite enclosed on the outside, when one entered the facility, it was an explosion of space on the inside and openness. These are just a few more shots of the facility. Again, to contend with the northwestern sunlight without impacting on the visual access from inside out. These were some custom designed screens, again anchored to a subframe behind. These are the laboratory environments within. Again, we offered the screens on the outside, offered privacy from outside in, but at the same time gave the researchers the opportunity to look towards the hillscape, which is clearly shown there, to the outside. And again, a lot of these laboratories, because of their nature, are governed by some pretty stringent standards. And we just discovered that 2 weeks ago they have passed or have been accredited with their PC2 license, which is great news. Simple materials on the inside. We decided to explore the use of compact laminate to its nth degree. In this instance, it's Trespa throughout, including some of the vaults in the ceiling, as you can see there. Generally, Trespa in the laboratory sense are usually used or limited to bench tops and the like, but we decided to explore its use in window reveals, ceiling vaults, bench top joinery, and so on. We were quite surprised to actually, when we went in, during the handover, we were quite surprised to discover that the builder has actually used some of the compact laminate offcuts to trim and dress some of the steel base plates within the back of house areas. Again, we sought opportunities to punch light wells into the facade in order to maximize the influx of natural light. These are just some portals into the facility. And again, it is standing seam zinc, which we were quite fortunate to find a contractor locally in Queensland. So virtually 99.9% of this facility was done using Queensland labour, as well as Queensland-based contractor as well, which was Kia Constructions. These are just a few more shots of the facility itself. The inspiration for the reflective stainless steel overhead was to basically, again, another simple metaphor to replicate the rippling of water, to give people an indication of the core activity within this facility. This is the internal courtyard. Again, as I've said earlier, there's great opportunity to maximize transparency and open up the internal of this building. And the courtyard aided in that by allowing us to just dress all four sides of it with glazing, so that there was a diagonal and cross-diagonal ability for staff to visually access their laboratory work centers from the central staff and operational area. For visitors upon entry, they had a close to a 270 to 180 degree visual access across the chemistry work center as well as the biology laboratories. This is the back of house. Again, a lot of core flammable, highly flammable toxic gases that had to be contained, be it argon, hydrogen, and so on. Your vehicle entry zones, plant, and infrastructure towards the back end of the facility to be kept away. We wanted to keep that visually away from the streetscape or the street frontage. The building in its form basically is of a scale similar to the surrounding neighborhood as well. There's a lot of single-story houses opposite this facility. So whilst it is a laboratory facility performing a commercial service, we didn't want it to basically stand out or be in contrast to the urban context too significantly. Again, some examples of the zinc detailing, gutter-free water capture with a series of light well punch-outs into the facility. Internally, again, cross-transparency, visual access. Microbiology and chemistry labs are hazardous zones. And whilst these activities do take place in the laboratory, the senior staff did want to maintain visual access and supervision and monitoring on training staff, as well as any visitors that were coming through the facility as well. Again, flooding of natural light through the facility. We felt there was no need to hide the structure. We basically expressed that and made it part of the actual aesthetic on the inside. Again, whilst there's visual access from office into lab, there was also visual access from lab back into office as well. Staff breakout areas, again with good visual outlook to the ranges beyond. And again, the work zone areas with that cross transparency and visual access along to the external, that is the streetscape in front of the building. Just some examples of the laboratory fit out on the internal. Whilst a lot of these laboratories, especially of a containment class, do struggle with sterility or visual sterility, we basically flooded it with color just to give it that visual relief to the users, considering the long hours that they do spend in these areas. We were acknowledged, or the facility was positively acknowledged and welcomed by the local community. It was opened by the local mayor, Bob Manning. If anything, one of the positive aspects was this facility wasn't only going to service Cairns, but also the Torres Strait and neighbouring areas all the way down to Townsville as well. We're quite proud of it, and so are the local community of Cairns. Before I close off, I want to really just quickly give thanks to Davison Development Solutions, Care Constructions, our sub-consultants, WSP and Arabs. Arabs really innovative and fantastic in terms of coming up with a portal frame or the structure to align with 2CA's vision for the facility. So again, thanks to the Institute for including us in this year's Shortlist series. Thank you.
Thank you, Vino. If you can unshare your screen now, we can move right along to the next project, which was also, as well as being shortlisted in this category, has also been awarded the Walter Hodgman Award at the recent regional awards. So it's already a winner. Shortlisted in this category is Matthew Lamy of Jacobs, who will take us through replacement Chinook facilities. Over to you, Matthew.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, share my screen. Okay. Okay. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present this project, the replacement Chinook facility in Townsville. This project is at the RAF base in Townsville, located adjacent Townsville Airport, and it replaced a series of outdated buildings with some new fit-for-purpose facilities for the maintenance and training of the new Chinook helicopters that were recently purchased by Department of Defence. And these helicopters are based in Townsville, and this is their centre of operations. The project is a 9,100 square metre maintenance facility, which you see in this picture, and there's also an adjacent smaller training facility. It's a unique building type which includes a diverse range of spaces, including the aircraft maintenance bays, specialist workshops, administration offices, training facilities, crew facilities, stores and amenities. So there's quite a good mix of spaces varying in complexity, from simple storerooms through office space right up to highly technical workshops that I guess are similar to laboratory type spaces. Now, being a defence project, it was driven mainly by pragmatic issues of functionality, operational continuity and technical requirements, but we still managed to develop an architectural design approach to interpret this into a clear set of spaces that incorporate these things, including flexibility, longevity and sustainability. This is a view of the main maintenance hangars in the building, and the key part of this project was the co-location of multiple existing groups into a shared facility with close integration of the airside and landside facilities. This is also demonstrated by the management office sticking out on the right-hand side here. So Jacobs worked with the Department of Defence on the concept design of this project from as early as 2011. We provided an integrated multidisciplinary design service through all stages of the project. So it was not just architecture, but included civil, structural, building services, environmental, quantity surveying and acoustics. The initial design and funding approval process took a few years to resolve and involved the removal of one of the hangar bays, which is the one in the foreground here. Construction eventually began in 2015 under a traditional styled contract with Lend-Lease. And midway through the construction, funding was granted for the third hangar bay. So this one obviously has come back into the project, and that was built under a concurrent contract with Lend-Lease, but this time they were acting as the managing contractor. So basically we had two different types of construction contracts happening at the same time. Now the final stages were completed in early 2019, and the total cost of about $50 million. Just to put that into perspective, that is the cost approximately of one of the Chinook helicopters. So yeah, a major consideration is keeping to the budget, but also remembering the priorities of the project. Okay, so this is some site plans. On the right is just the overall context in relation to Townsville Airport. The runways running up through here, and our project is in this area, so that's a blow up of the locality plan. We've got the main road, Ingham Road, down here. We've got the I guess the Army helicopter squadron in this area here, and adjacent the Townsville Common wetlands on the western side there. So we are in an existing brownfield site. This is the maintenance facility here and the training facility there. And to the north are the hangars where they store the aircraft, and there's some more hangars and maintenance facilities over to the left there. So it was quite a complex site, being a brownfield site. There was a lot of consideration of working within an active base and maintaining operations through construction. We also allowed for future expansion to the south and to the east here as well. And it was about managing the pedestrian vehicle connectivity with the adjacent buildings. So moving on to the planning, the building actually developed in line with the original diagram shown on the right-hand side there. That was about focusing on the key needs for the service bays and getting them to work effectively, which is these three large spaces here, and then providing large hangar doors with airside access to get the helicopters in and out, obviously. And then there was also need to get parts to and from the adjacent workshops here on the ground level. So that direct functional relationship was very important. There's also a collection of storerooms, amenities, and operational areas at the ground floor there. So they all acted as support spaces. On the first floor, there's a void wrapping around against the hangar, two-story hangar section, and the upper floor contained mainly offices, plant rooms, crew spaces, and training rooms. The grey shaded areas were considered air-conditioned or acoustic pods, if you like, so that contained all the highly serviced spaces, and then the remainder of the circulation spaces were unair conditioned and formed a natural breezeway that ran north, south, east, west through the building, promoting cross ventilation. Down here we also had the training building, which is a smaller version of the main building form and consists of 2 flight simulators with some other support facilities. These Google Earth views kind of show the staging process and how that building diagram helped with that. The first one is pre-construction, showing the existing buildings there. The first stage was the Western Annex, which slid along the western side of those existing buildings. Once that was operational, these buildings were vacated temporarily and the site was cleared to make way for the next stage. Then we commenced work on the northern annex, plus the first 2 service bays, followed by upon completion of that, the 3rd bay started as well, and then we got to the finished result. So it was quite a long construction process, but it enabled full operation during that process. The western side of the building contains the main entrance located here, and the building's characterised by long extruded forms with angled walls, plenty of sun shading, and lots of profiled colorbond steel cladding with a robust concrete blockwork base around the building. These entrances have louvers to enable natural ventilation into the breezeways, and as I said, all the windows are very well shaded. For acoustics, these windows needed to be triple glazed, so it worked good from an acoustic and a thermal point of view. The airside face of the building features these large fold-up aircraft doors, which are 25 metres wide. They allow good ventilation and aircraft access into the service bays. We also have very large overhangs to help with the wet season, and providing louvers in those doors so that they can close them down when there's a storm on, but still allow that ventilation to come through there. On the right hand side is a part of the mesh screen into that breezeway. The Chinook Helicopters, which are the main reason for this whole project, are medium lift cargo helicopters that support the Army in many uses, such as military operations, training, and community support. For example, you may have seen that they were used in the recent bushfire events around the country and also in the Townsville floods. They have been around since the 1960s. However, the latest model is very high tech in terms of its electronics, if not obvious from the outside of the aircraft. They also need regular maintenance every 100 hours of flight time, and every 400 hours that includes a major 8-week overhaul where they take everything apart, check and rebuild. The service bays are equipped with large gantry cranes, high velocity fans for enhancing the cooling, and all equipment and parts needed around the perimeter to get that to work. The users have been very happy with the facility. We've got some great feedback from them in terms of thermal comfort for the staff working in there, that they don't get as fatigued in there, and it's also a lot more efficient and practical for them. The section demonstrates some of the sustainability aspects. As I said before, the key aspect was making sure the service bays were well ventilated for comfort and maintaining the workflows. The hangars are orientated to pick up the prevailing sea breeze, and the diagram below shows how that encourages cross ventilation through there, both at ground level and also through high level vents which exhaust out to the west. This is also supplemented with the large fans which provide a good supplementary cooling system. Also, the external breezeway corridors around those hangars are supplied again with good sources of airflow into them, and also heat exhaustion through thermal chimneys. These thermal chimneys also have skylights to provide natural lighting. And I mentioned before that the well-insulated air-conditioned pods is about minimising the use of air conditioning to where it's absolutely required. Also, the construction of the service bays with tilt-up concrete enabled fire compartmentalisation to work quite efficiently, in that we can fire protect each hangar as a separate fire compartment with drencher sprinklers, and that has improved environmentally as well, with avoiding the use of the aviation foam, which has been banned. These breezeway corridors stretch the whole length and width of the building. The longest run is over 100 metres down there on the right. And they provide efficient connection between the service bays, the stores and the workshop at ground level. And as I mentioned, they catered for with louvered end walls and thermal chimneys and skylights that help turn these quite utilitarian corridors into climatically appropriate breezeways. The natural ventilation has been working very well every time I've been on site, and certainly it was working well when the regional jury were there. So it's been a very successful part of the project. Also, the painting the walls and the floor in the light colours helps reflect the light and bring that light deep into the depth of the plan. The interior generally has a quite a raw industrial aesthetic with low maintenance finishes, exposed surfaces and no ceilings. The exception being for office areas which are fitted out with carpet tiles and ceiling grids. However, given that most of the building is industrial and workshop type spaces, this aesthetic has worked quite well from both a serviceability point of view and a budget point of view. So on the left, the upper floor breezeway is well connected to the lower level, with the voids offsetting the corridor and multiple stairwell connections. And on the right-hand side, you can see how the circulation spaces and stairwells are used as informal breakout areas to encourage that social interaction between the various teams, and also provide views to the exterior and other parts of the building. Now, the building has lots of specifically purpose rooms. So on the left is the aircrew's kit room, which is a special fire rated controlled room, which stores all the helmets and backpacks, vests, etc. that the aircrew need. And on the right, you see examples of some of the ground level areas of the breezeway where they've started personalising the space with their equipment and bikes and the like. But there's other areas, especially upstairs, where they've displayed all their photos and memorabilia to demonstrate the pride they have in their team and its achievements. And one of the more rewarding aspects was in the original building, which got demolished, there was a large mural where which had been there for quite some time, where a lot of past members had signed it and autographed it, etc. So in order to preserve that, we've photographed it and reinstated it as a wallpaper in the staff common room. So that's, yeah, just showing that the users have adapted well in this building. Here we have some more internal spaces. This is on the left, the flight line counter, which is the operational hub of this maintenance building. This is, I guess, where the aircrew drop off the keys to check in their aircraft for a service and monitor the maintenance progress for the aircraft. And this is kind of an example of the level finishes in the, I guess, the air-conditioned or office type areas of the building, and also has great views out onto the apron and tarmac area, which does not display in this photo, but it certainly has great views and supervision of the airside. On the right, we contrast that with a workshop space. This is the fabric workshop, where they specialise in the repair of the aircrew uniforms and helmets. This obviously has a more technical focus on functionality and building services. So this is one of those especially briefed areas where we had to get the right amount for electrical, mechanical, and layout to suit their needs and to improve on their existing conditions that they had. There's other workshops for various other purposes, including aviation electronics, metalwork, even a life raft repair room where they repair leaks and the like. Okay, this is the final slide. This is the training building, which sits a few about 100 meters or so away. It has a very similar form to the main building, but on a much reduced scale. Again, similar materials with the blockwork and the colour bond finishes. The high section on the left contains the flight simulators, which are quite a tall structure, and then on the right is the support spaces that that support the training. So that was a brief overview of the project, and yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity again. Okay, I'll pass you back. Thanks.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Julie.
That was a great presentation. Such a wonderful, diverse range of projects in this category.
Yep.
And thank you to everybody who's watching for hanging in there. We've got one final presentation to go. And last, but by no means least, we have Paul Curran and Andrew Brock of Push and Andrew Brock Architecture, respectively, to tell us the story of their collaboration, Sunshine Beach Surf Lifesaving Club. Thanks, gents.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you. Paul and I are very, very proud to have received a commendation for our project that we did together. Paul's going to share a presentation document on the screen, and so I'll hand over to him now.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm trying to share my screen with the document, but I'm not having much luck. Yeah. There we go. That's all good. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thanks for hanging in there for this presentation of the Sunshine Beach Surf Club, which Andrew and I collaborated on to put in a submission initially to win the project, which was a big deal for both of our practices, and then go through and deliver it. The initial slides I'll be showing you of some initial site study and analysis we did.
I'll just quickly tell you, Paul invited me to join him. We've known each other for 25 plus years, and so we responded to an invitation which was nationally advertised to apply for the architectural role on the project, and we attended a briefing session at the club, the old club, which was initially started in 1982 as a shed. There was something like 45 individual groups of people. Some of them, there was 2 and 3 in a group, all squished into the old conference room, tiny conference room on the top floor. You can see there, and it was quite an interesting situation actually. So we weren't really terribly hopeful that we would win this project. We went through a series of interviews, luckily, and I'm a local here. I just live up the hill, so I was pretty keen to get the project. I'm also a clubby and a surfer, and Paul's a keen surfer as well. So we knew that the culture of the client, and we went through a series of interviews, and we ended up coming second, which was disappointing. But ultimately,
however, they quickly reversed that decision, and we came first, and we were given the commission. Yeah, so it was very exciting for both of us to get it. Push had just recently completed a job for the Griffith University Student Guild, which was basically a student club and hospitality facility. So that was good runs on the board there. What we had in our favour here was a president at the club that wanted to produce some architecture. He wasn't quite sure what he knew about architecture, but he did know that he wanted a good and iconic building, which was a really good brief for us. However, in general, the client was quite uneducated about architecture, and we had to do a lot of visualization work in terms of getting them across the line with a lot of the ideas. The building you see on your screen is the old Maury Hurst design surf club, which had been extended, but it was well along past its use by date and nowhere near big enough for this, the way the club was growing. This club is very successful in hospitality rather than poker machines, which is a bit of a change for these sorts of venues. They do very well with eating and drinking, and they got one of the best views on the coast, as many surf clubs do. This gives you a bit of an idea of the locale, and it's the club is nestled in sort of a dune structure at the foreshore of Sunshine Beach, but it connects back to Duke Street, where there's restaurants and cafes, and it's a bit of a hub for the Sunshine Beach area. You can see at the bottom of this particular photograph some very big homes. So the club itself is probably smaller than some of the houses that are actually at Sunshine Beach, which is a fairly affluent area. This gives a good idea of the aspect that we're dealing with here in terms of, you know, we're dealing with a fairly harsh morning sun, but great views throughout the day across the ocean.
Our client was, apart from a very strong president, was a quite extensive building committee of people who have got a range of experience from nothing to quite a lot of experience working with building projects. So we had to adapt the way we work to make sure that we could speak the language of everybody involved, make sure they understood exactly why we were pushing for certain things. So we did do a lot of this basic site analysis work. You know, the club sits at one of the most prominent spots on the north of the Sunshine Coast. It sits in the middle of a park, which is state government property, and it has, as Paul said, it's got a lot of residential neighbours around the perimeter.
Yeah. So this is a really initial sketch, which is just trying to get it across to the club. Some of the ideas that we might bring to it at this point, we hadn't even got the commission, but we wanted to give them an idea of what was possible in terms of, you know, nestling a building into the parkland structure, and what we were hoping to achieve in terms of maximising the views, which they of course saw as being very important, but also nestling into the dune structure, protecting from the southeast winds, which when they prevail can make the outdoor dining and drinking areas really unpleasant. And we had extensive outdoor dining and drinking areas here as part of our brief. A lot of the seating is outside but covered.
The site is, as I said, it's Crown land, and we have a lease within that. That's the actual site, and it's a very fixed line that we couldn't extend beyond the lease. We couldn't adapt it or change it. It would require us to go through massive applications. We'd have to go back through native title. So we weren't even permitted to have downpipes beyond the lease line or any overhangs or structures. So we were to a certain extent restricted to our site, whilst we could do a very high site cover. This is a sketch that I did just dreaming about, again, before we got the job. I'd been out surfing, and I was imagining how the building could nestle into the dunes with its
we love this sketch because it's our view from the surf of looking back at the architecture of the club and the dune. So it's fantastic, and as a good starting point for us. This is the view from the park, and you can see the way the dune undulates through the park, and the significant Norfolk pine trees that are in that park as part of the aspect that you enter the club from this angle. The rear of the club is for servicing and the working club. And we had to maintain the ground level services where all the clubby equipment is stored, whilst we built 2 new levels over the top of it and around it.
The club had been renovated in 5 different stages. And as Paul said, we had to keep the active club operational throughout the entire process. So the idea was we would demolish the building down to the ground floor slab and work up from there.
This is the site that Andrew said is so strict for us. You can see the lease line clearly shown there, and we had to stick within that. Even the car park as part of council's land we don't officially have a car park. Unofficially, that is the car park for the club, but it's also the car park for everyone attending the beach and going surfing and taking their family down if they have to drive down to the flagged area that the club services. So car parking is a premium, and it's very much a local facility, I guess, as well as for tourists. So they do rely on Ubers, and there is a community bus service they run as well in terms of getting people to and from the club. This is a view of how the floor plan ended up resolving itself, I guess. And with any club, unfortunately, you have to sort of bring everyone through and sign them in. So you can only really have one point of entry, as much as we would have liked to have a beach entry and access from direct up through the beach and into the club. That was not really achievable under the laws of how a club works. So we have to bring everyone through where you see 1, 2, and 3 there, which is the entry areas of the club. I don't know what cursor shows. This is where we're bringing people in. Just in general, the building form wraps in an arc from our perspective around protecting from the southeasters, and we have the external eating areas where you see a lot of chairs and tables. We had to fit certain number of chairs and tables because that was part of the financial modelling we were given to create. There's a revised poker machine room at the rear. It wasn't considered a very important part of their business. So that was fitted in. We had to install a lift that services all 3 levels. New amenities, a big new kitchen. So a new kitchen facility, because they do serve a lot of meals, and they breakfast, lunch and dinner they're open for. And then a new bar in the centre, which part of our brief was to provide many different feelings and areas for people to sit in. So we had, as you entered, we had what we called a perch bar. We had the main area here. We had these booths that were sort of built into some concrete sheltered areas which had great framed views, and that was called the snug area. And then we had this sort of sports bar area down the back that we nicknamed Castaways for the sports fans. Yeah, and then we had this tiered, I guess, for want of a better word, a beer garden area where we lifted up this area at the back so you could actually view over the top of the seating in front to help maximise your view of the ocean even from the rear seats.
We undertook quite an exhaustive series of alternative sketches looking at how we could plan the building in an alternative way. Some of the committee members weren't convinced. So yeah, we ended up looking at lots of different options, but because of the topography and the fact that the only access to the active club below is via the driveway to the right, where that line of trees is.
This is the driveway here? Yep.
Yeah, we really only had the one point legally to get in the building. There is a roadway around the back to the beach that the active club uses to get through to the beach, but yeah, we stuck with this plan at the end of the day.
Yeah, and the project had a few budget hurdles to jump over. We had a QS on board from the start, and he came up with a budget that was significantly more than what the club wanted to spend. I guess we could say that they wanted to spend 4 million and it came in closer to 6.5 million. So the club was immediately worried that we were spending too much money, but it was just a fact that their brief was far more extensive than their budget would allow. So they were never going to get the facility they needed for 4 million. On top of this, we have a function area. This is the plan for the function area for up to 200 people, and it also has a bar and a mini kitchen and amenities as well. So, you know, they want to be able to have weddings, bands, conferences and things up there, and that's a very popular area for them and has been booking out. So in terms of us working through the budget issues. That was another difficulty with the client, but we certainly got through there, and in the end they found the extra money, and from the initial budget to what they spent it remained at that 6.5 million.
They applied to the federal government for a building grant, and they received an extra 2.5 million. Plus they also had a year of trading in between as well, between when we did our work and construction starting.
This plan shows a couple of curved roofed pergola areas as well, as part of our roof design, which stretches out here to cover as much as outdoor dining as we were allowed to from the Noosa Shire Council, who are quite strict on the extent of our roof. These roofs were supposedly could be demountable or removable, or for some strange reason, I don't know why they thought that was important, but they just were meant to be a lightweight, less intrusive structure, which they were lower. And Andrew and I had to take photographs from apartments and other residential properties around the area, and then render the building into the views to show that we weren't impeding the views of the neighbours too much. Here's some of the visualisation work we did for the client, which really helped in terms of selling them on the idea and selling them on the architecture. And I thought I'd show some of these images because whilst we've got some great photographs, we don't have all angles of the building to show you, but this shows the ideas that we were working with in terms of creating the new entry. There's a new stair that takes you up. So we sort of were thinking of people getting married and having this great stair that they could enter up to the function area. A little bit of landscaping so that the beer garden borrows from this landscape, which is a nice thing because we ran out of room to give the beer garden any garden due to the fact we had to provide so many chairs and tables. So another view of the entry and the stairwell and the view from the car park. If I just go back to this area, the client was really concerned initially that this was sort of too narrow, but of course we knew that it would be okay. It was all the space that we had to deal with really, but I think there's a sense of drama and excitement in coming into a double volume like this and then walking in underneath the lower area of the stair and then getting the view out to the ocean pretty quickly as you come from the park and into the building.
The palette of materials was a very careful consideration. Both Paul and I work in a way where we work with materials that don't require a lot of finishing, that got a high resistance, and particularly in this instance where it's right on the ocean front, couldn't get any closer to the ocean. So we were looking for using materials which obviously didn't require maintenance, had longevity. Plus we weren't, with the class of building, we weren't permitted to use timber in the exterior, which we initially hoped to do. We are allowed to use it in fenced structures and so on, but it was not permitted the rest of the building structure. So we've used an exterior of compressed fibre, pre-finished fibre cement sheeting, Equitone.
Powder-coated aluminium on the batten screens. These screens to the beer garden were allowed to be recycled timber, so the client really was insistent on having some timber, which was good. So we were able to use recycled timber to the fencing and garden areas and the pergolas. To the rear of the club, so there's a view of that from some of the residential areas. We wanted to make sure that looked quite tidy, so took a bit of care with that as you walk around into the service areas. And here's some views of the area. These are some construction photos which, so it went to a design and construct. So we had limited site involvement, which is always a bit of a concern as you'd expect, but these are some site photos when we did go and inspect. And when I saw this photo, I started to get happy that we were going to get the result that we'd worked so hard on in terms of getting a really neat roof line and a curved roof line and some sensuous curves, and that also contrasted some of the angles of the work that we were doing here.
Yeah, the curved roof was an idea to obviously reflects the profile of the site in that corner with the car park. But it was an idea which we really had from the start, which was create an encapsulated courtyard space where when the southerlies did come through, you could sit in that winter garden area and be sheltered and also, but at the same time see the sky. That the main orientation is to the northeast towards Sunshine Beach headland, this national park headland. And you get quite good views from that new function space upstairs. But the curved roof just enabled us to actually frame the views as you move through the building.
Yeah, and the framing of the views is really a nice thing that happens. A lot of surf clubs, you'd know, would just have banks of glass walls, whereas we wanted to do a little bit more with that in the way that people appreciated the view that they had of the ocean and the beach. Here's a view of the stair. When you draw up a stair like this, you're always concerned about how the formwork's going to go and whether they're going to get it good enough. This one turned out quite well, I think. Here's how the workers on site appreciate the view from the upper level as it was being built. And here's some photographs taken by Andrew.
Yeah, so this is early morning.
Finished product.
Just when they'd finished the building, they actually hadn't had any. They had a couple of soft openings, but the public hadn't been let in yet. The public had to wait for quite a while and were desperate to get back in. They loved their surfing, so we managed to get some shots just quickly before they opened up.
We wanted to have an outdoor fireplace, and in the end, it's gone in as a gas fireplace. But we had a wood-burning chimney structure there, which was also helps hold the roof up at one stage. So that became an element of the beer garden area and also a structural element, but it's fairly sculptural on the outside of the building too. So that's what that element is. Here's a drone view that Andrew took, looking back at the club.
Yeah, so this picks up the shape of the curved form that wraps around the outdoor areas.
And it also shows how neat the roof is. So the roof form's quite low profiled and neatly nestled into the landscape. One thing that we really tried hard to do was to hide the mechanical services. Of course, there's a big commercial kitchen there with a large exhaust, and there's a lot of mechanical equipment that drives the keg rooms and the freezers and the food storage and all, as well as the air conditioning plant for the building. So all that is pocketed in this roof, and you don't see it from any angle. So it's sort of neatly pocketed in behind the function area on the upper level. There's a good view of the off-form concrete walls to the snug, and you can see the glazing that they have that frames the view from those little seating booths out, and also from the upper level on the function area.
We like the way that this particular shot shows that the building almost reflecting the headland form as well. It's such an iconic spot, and it's an iconic opportunity to design a building on the coast like this. But so yeah, we wanted it to reflect the profile of the coast. We actually had that happening inside as well with the bulkhead profile.
Here's another great context photo of an approach to the building and showing how it sits in neatly within the dune structure and the roads, and how sort of intimate it is with its surroundings. And again, nice reflections out to the ocean.
So the building reveals itself as you move through. It's one of the benefits of having a one-point entry. As you come through that progression, you get to see different bits and glimpses of the views. They were very important. Very adamant about maintaining their deck. They're very proud of their old deck, and that was the main focus. It's all about the best view on the coast.
In the interior, the bulkhead forms that for the air conditioning, venting, and the bar form curving and gently wrapping around, these things were reflective of the external architecture and just helped us create nice interior spaces. There wasn't a lot of money to be spent, so you can even see we've used portions of the existing slab and added to it and filled in other parts. It's an off-form concrete soffit, which is and then a little bit of timber and plasterboard. It's quite pared back in terms of what we were able to do there, but still a really good surf club environment.
There was some degree of desire from the committee members to adorn the interior with all the surf club paraphernalia that usually happens, but the President was really keen to try and keep, as we were, to try and keep the interiors as simple as possible. This particular shot shows the use of the perch bar area, which you know, Paul had spent a lot of time trying to explain to the client how this space would work, and we love the idea that, you know, there's a different demographic now sharing this building. You get people who probably wouldn't normally inhabit a surf club coming here now.
All the cool hipsters are turning up, all the young ones. So the club's really happy because it's been incredibly successful. Before the coronavirus issues shut them down, they were doing trade well in excess of what they expected or what they budgeted for. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, within the first 21 days, they had 30,000 visitors just after opening.
Yeah, so it's proved to be incredibly successful. What this photo shows is the boys on the stools on one side and the girls are sitting on chairs because they're on a higher level and they're actually out in the beer garden. So I told the President this would work like that, and he never believed me. And then when it was nice for him to come back and say, "You were right." Didn't happen too many times. Here's a good photograph of the stair and the entry. So a lot of form concrete here and some ground concrete on the entry floor. I like grind. Little details like this where they got the formwork right when you're not working on site. I was really happy to see that all worked out quite well. It makes a really nice feature in the entry. A couple of other views of the interior. Curving bulkheads. We have allowed room for television screens for football and things up there. The President was keen for that not to happen. Experience tells me that eventually they'll end up having to put them in. Here's the beer garden area showing the two tiers and the height of the different heights and the view out to the ocean.
And we were concerned that just making sure that that even though you were back in the winter garden, beer garden area, that you still had access to view. So we raised that area so it had views over the top of the lower terrace.
There's a little separate area here for kids, which is important at these clubs. And it's a good view of the beer garden and the deck bar, as they call it, in full swing. This is the food, where you order the food, little food entry. It's a bit of a joke between Andrew and I that they were meant to get rid of all this airport ticket sort of snaking entry, which they said they wouldn't do, but I think as soon as they opened, the chef that runs the restaurant wanted it there.
We have offered alternative ideas, but we'll see.
Here we go. These are the private box seats up the top here. These are the fantastic views and the cosy corner up at the top there looking over the deck bar. And a view back from that area back into the club. Gives a nice view of the two curving pergola roof forms, the lower roofs. Here you can see the gas fireplace on the left over here. It's part of that structure. Which will be a really nice feature in the winter. All right.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity for this presentation. And we look forward to the State Awards presentations. Good luck to everyone else involved.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for hanging in there.
And thank you guys for a great presentation. I think it's you, Paul. I can hear birdsong in the background at your place.
No,
It's actually Andrew.
Oh, is that you, Andrew? It just gave a beautiful undercurrent to the whole presentation. And thank you to those who are still with us. I'd like to thank all of our speakers joining us today, and wish everybody the very best in the upcoming State Awards, which are being streamed at 7 o'clock on Australian Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, the 9th of July. Thanks for tuning in. Coming up on Friday, the 15th of June, you can join Queensland Chapter's State Manager, Alison McRobbie, who will be hosting presentations from the Job and Froud Award for Residential Architecture, Multiple Housing. Stay safe and see you all then. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.